But I have a different set of experiences with him and around him, I think, because I mostly knew him in a writing context, and then we became friends kind of after that. I first heard of him, I was at a writing conference, the PNWA writing conference. I was talking to an editor at Little Brown and Company named Wes Miller, and we were talking about thrillers, and he said, I'm looking for young thriller writers. And he said, have you heard of Roger Hobbs? And he said it in sort of hushed tones because this guy's job at Little Brown and Company, he runs Mulholland Books. His job was literally, he was there to find the next Roger Hobbs, because that was right after Ghostman had taken off and had been, a big success and all that. I didn't know Hobbs then, and it turned out my brother Noah knew him totally separately, and I knew him, and I found out about him, read Ghostman, and admired it a lot, and started following him on Facebook, and then we ended up connecting when he moved to Seattle and had dinner with Laura and with Mandy. And I just got back from Las Vegas a few days ago, and I was interviewed on a podcast there by another writer named Stephen Campbell, and we started talking about Hobbs because he asked me about when my first book came out, and I said mentioned Hobbs, and he started looking like, this is like a 60-year-old guy who writes noir crime thrillers, and he looked like a little boy almost at the mention of Hobbs. He said, oh my God, you knew Hobbs? And he started talking about Ghostman and like how it made him feel when he read it. And so this was just a few days ago this happened, like randomly on it. I told him I was coming to this, and in the writing community, for those who really struggle with writing, the admiration people had for his talent is more than any other writer I know, and I know a lot of writers. I did a writing podcast for a few years, so I talked to lots and lots and lots of writers, including lots of thriller and mystery type writers, and the admiration people had for him is, unless you've tried to write and failed to write and written bad stuff for years and years and years, it's hard to comprehend how hard it is to be as good as he was. I still can't really comprehend it, and most writers I know can't comprehend it. And so this guy, Stephen Campbell, on this podcast, who's been at it a long time, a lot longer than Hobbs was alive, and a lot longer than I've been at it, was just sort of in awe of his talent, and was so disappointed that there aren't going to be any more books. So that's just one kind of perspective from within the kind of the writing world, that a lot of people like me and a lot of others I know try really hard and work really hard at it. And sort of like you guys were all describing, like his impact on you and the kind of intelligence he had and how to make people feel like the star, and his intelligence and curiosity was so vast, and he was able to transmit that through writing like most people who are at it decades and decades never are able to. But there's also, I think, a downside to that, which is, as I got to know him a little bit more and he started talking to me about it, and having the level of success he had at his age, which most writers spend their entire careers and don't hit that level of success that he had in his early 20s. He told me that he got really mean mail from other jealous writers, hate mail, which mostly just sounded like jealousy mail to me. And the amount of pressure I think he felt, I felt tremendous pressure when my first book came out with a tiny publisher and no expectations and no money behind it. The kind of pressure I think he felt scared me, because because there's so many writers working so hard to try to get where he got so early. I think I don't know, I almost caved under the pressure, and I was 10 years older than him and had nowhere near the kind of expectations heaped on me that he did. And so I tried to talk to him about that a few times, and but I was never as close to him as I think a lot of people here were. We never fully kind of connected on a super personal or intimate level that I wish we had. We did, it just never, that kind of stuff we couldn't quite talk about all the way. But I always worried about that level of pressure, because I know a good description that I saw and go by on Facebook of being a writer is like you have homework every day of your life and then you die. And it's like there is not a point where you feel like there's like a fully an off button. And when you combine that with how young he was and the level of talent he had and the fact that he could have and would have written anything he wanted, not just in the genre, he could have written anything he wanted. When we talked about story, he would have, it just makes me sad that the stuff that I knew was coming isn't coming. The month before he passed away, we were exchanging the first 50 pages of my book with the first 50 pages of City of Sirens, which was going to be his third book. And I'll just tell one more story about that. When he was working on that, we would get together and write together in Seattle and sit around at coffee shops and things like that. And one day, he had a weird way of working. I work really disciplined, like sit down, write 2,000 words, and then I've got like family life and a bunch of other stuff. And he would just kind of wing it whenever. It seemed like we would sit down, we would write, and we spent like half a day, and it didn't seem like he had written anything. Like I didn't know what he was doing, and I was trying to write. So we were sitting. Finally, we're getting some tacos, and then like in between bites of tacos, he just started dictating, and it was like 2 or 3 fully formed pages, which now I still have on my hard drive. He wasn't dictating them to me. He was just like speaking out loud. How about this? And it was like fully formed, perfectly written pages about this coup going on in Bangkok while this heist of some painting on the 80th floor of this high rise has to happen. And there's all these smells from a food cart. And there's, just like this incredible, vivid scene, better than the best thing I've ever written. And it literally, I'm not exaggerating, and it was off the top of his head in between bites of a taco. And I was just like, holy shit. Because a lot of writers know, and artists of all kinds really struggle and write and type and rewrite. And he had been doing it just in his head. And so I was in awe of his talent. A lot of people I knew were in awe of his talent, and I think it's not just talent because he really worked at it also, but I think his talent was just a reflection of something even bigger, his huge intelligence and curiosity and his ability to just sort of bullshit but in ways that were mesmerizing. And in writers, that's a lot of what we try to do, to sell that voice. And he obviously was a master at that.